Dear colleagues, good evening. Svetlana Alexandrovna, thank you very much for moderating the first session, and my apologies to our colleagues from the second session, right? But I think that comments from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? Russian view from officials is extremely important. Me personally, I never worked in Nigeria, right? I worked in just 10 kilometers from Nigerian border, right? In Benin Republic, right? For 3 years, right? So we were neighbors, right? Yeah. And our first speaker, it's a pleasure for me to present our first speaker. Just as a couple of weeks ago, I was in Myanmar, right? And we met in person, right? And now we meet online. Dr. Naing Sve Oo, he's founder and executive director of Taininga Institute for Strategic Studies. And Dr. Naing, also my apologies, right, for being late with second session. But as I remember, you are also member of advisory committee of Myanmar Institute of Strategic Studies, right? So you work closely with Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Myanmar. That's why you know how it is important, right? When our colleagues from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they comment, right? Something, right? And okay, the floor is yours, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Dennis. Good evening, professors, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to participate in this workshop. Today, I would like to discuss about the modernization of peacekeeping and increasing the effectiveness of operations. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a general consensus among practitioners and scholars in the conflict resolution field that being the only universal collective security organization, the United Nations is the uniquely positioned to save the succeeding generation from the scourge of war. Most would also agree that the UN cannot meet this challenge without the wholehearted support of its member states. The peace operations were created and have evolved on the basis of a broad international consensus on their purpose and methods. The mission are established to have stabilized a post-conflict society through a mix of security, politics, and economic activity that are carried out in the support of the sovereign host states. The ultimate goal is positive peace, that is support to emanates from the structural change and also the local adherence to the virtue of democracy. Most importantly, peacekeeping operation, they differ from the war fightings. Peacekeeping is not about fighting an enemy, and the recent evolution towards more robustness have not fundamentally changed this. Furthermore, peacekeeping operations are made possibly by the consent of the host states on the deployment and the mandate. This allows the sovereignty of the host states to be theoretically preserved. So peacekeeping is an essential tool for the creating lasting peace in war-torn societies. The international system has changed in many ways since the first deployment of peacekeepers in 1948. New adult challenges have emerged and mandates have evolved. The 21st century brings the enormous challenges to the international community's peace and security, and peacekeeping will have to address many of these challenges. So this collective endeavor, which embody the values of multilateralism and cooperation that saves thousands of lives every year. And the peacekeeping operation have become more complex and their mission are more diverse. A peacekeeping operation consists not only of the military personnel, but also of police officers and civilians in order to be able to respond all the challenges on the ground. So they work together to strengthen the security and the supports political process leading to the peace building. In mid-1990s, after the series of high-profile UN peacekeeping operation failure all around the world, both the UN Secretariat and the member states were forced to acknowledge that the concept of classical peacekeeping is at best ineffective when it came to addressing intrastate conflicts whose protracted and complex nature require comprehensive conflict resolution treatment that is markedly different from the original concept of classical peacekeeping. The subsequent attempts to move from the classical to the second generation peacekeeping undoubtedly represent a step forward in the right direction. Most peacekeeping operations are multifunctional and multidimensional and evolved in the line with transition objective. Their role is not just to maintain security, but to support to protect the civilian, strengthen the rules of law, uphold the human rights, provide humanitarian assistance, and also support the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration process, DDR, and also the security sector reform, SSR. So sometimes the mandates for the peacekeeping operation now often go beyond the strict security-oriented framework of peacekeeping, and they are shifting more toward the area of peace building, sometimes even when the conflict are over. The peacekeeping operation often have to contribute with regional organization. So they involved in the line with the improvement in the situation on the ground, reduction in the number of the military personnel, shift toward an international presence in the form of police forces, slight civilian components. Once they have completed their mandate, peacekeeping missions are meant to withdraw from the country. A robust military presence is considered essential during the initial stages of the peacekeeping operation in order to deter the potential spoiler and establish the mission credibility. Finding troops with the necessary training, equipment, and logistical support to effectively undertake the complex and the often dangerous tasks required of the peacekeeper remain a key determinant of the operation success. However, this is easier said than done, since the states who possess such truths have often proven unwilling or unable to make them available for peacekeeping operations. Threat to the safety and security of the free personnel has also become an issue of great concern, particularly after the 2003 terrorist attack on the United Nations headquarters in Baghdad, prompting the Secretary General to order a review of the entire UN security system. The improvements are ongoing in this area and require further supply by the member state. So restoring a semblance of functioning states is an increasingly important aspect of complex peacekeeping operations. There's a growing consensus on the need to shore up basic state services, including the judiciary, civil administration, and public utility, in order for post-conflict society to return to the normalcy as quickly as possible. In this regards, the rule of law component has become a critical part of the mission planning, and also the considerable progress has been made in establishing capacity to support police, judicial, and correctional activities in post-conflict society. The conflict dynamics over the past 20 years have generated a range of challenges to the peacekeeping operation that have required significant evolution from the traditional mission of the 70 years ago. Originally designed to support interstate ceasefires and the peace agreement, the modern peace operation have shifted over time, increasingly to address intra-state conflicts, fear of fragile states, and certain involving asymmetric use of force, including from the violence extremist groups. The rise of multi-dimensional peace operation in 1990s reflected this shift as the United Nations gradually expand its role into the state building, stabilization, protection of civilian human rights monitoring, institutional capacity building, and robust use of force. Today's conflict trend may presage the need for another evolution in peace operation in the coming 5 to 10 years. In fact, there are already signs that the configuration, mandates, and the support provided to peace operation today may be poorly suited to managing the violent conflicts that are prevalent in many parts of the world. So specifically, the growth in the importance of non-state actors, including transnational illicit networks, globally connected violent extremist groups, and private actors within new technologies. poses a set of challenges that the United Nations has thus far proven ill-equipped to address. Shifting geopolitical and regional dynamics to have meant the UN has at times been sidelined or otherwise unable to influence violent conflicts that are sustained by proxies and regional interests. Emerging trends, most notably the influence of new technologies, the growing impact of climate change on security and rapid urbanization are already contributing to changing risk profile around the world. From early 1990s to early 2000s, the war witnessed a steady and sustained decline in civil war and an overall reduction in casualty caused by the war. However, this trend reversed between 2005 and 2015 as the number of major civil wars rose from 4 to 7, the highest since 1992. Minor civil war also rose during the same period, growing to the number not seen since the early 1990s. This growth in intrastate conflict generated a dramatic increase in the human cost of war. From 2011 to 2015, there was a six-fold increase in the border-related deaths, a rate that has slowed slightly in the past 3 years, but which remained far higher than the average over the past 2 decades. The 2014-15 period was the deadliest in terms of the battlefield deaths since the end of the Cold War, with a likely human cost for far broader in terms of the indirect death and sufferings. There are 3 interrelated factors which are driving the growing intractability of the today's conflicts, which are the rise of the transnational illicit network, increasing internationalization of civil war, and the role of violence extremist group in many of the most dangerous wars today. The partnership are at the heart of peacekeeping, from protecting the civilian in war-torn area and also the building social cohesion to ensuring the safe delivery of humanitarian aids, rebuilding infrastructure, and providing livelihood skills to impoverished communities. Peacekeepers should work with the local and international partner to help create conditions for the political solution and also the sustainable development. There are some factors that changes the peacekeeping operation nowadays, which are the first one is the advance in the climate action. The climate change exacerbates the risk of conflicts, and also it makes the recovery more difficult, increasing drought, desertification, floodings, food insecurity, and water and energy scarcity in many parts of the world is making it harder for conflict-affected community to rebuild their lives. Peacekeepers should serve on the front line of those compounding crises while working to reduce its own environmental impact. The second one is that about the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the onset of COVID-19, the peacekeepers have continued to protect civilians from the violence and maintain peace, while also to support the national responses to the pandemic. And the third one, which is to support the local livelihoods. For peace to last, a conflict affected community must be supported to rebuild livelihoods so that they can live in dignity. Peacekeepers should deliver and fund vocational and skill training workshops and service to help the local community generate income to support their families. The fourth one is to build national capacity to maintain peace and security. Peacekeeping mission work with host governments to build and improve national capacity to maintain security, law, and also order, and effective policing and justice mechanism. The fifth one is that to support women and youth in building sustainable peace. For the sustainable peace and development, we need the leadership of women and youth in shaping the solution that impacts their lives. The peacekeeping operation should support the meaningful engagement of the women and youth in the peace processes to ensure that their priorities are central to security and political decision. Ladies and gentlemen, as a conclusion, here are the same recommendations for the future peace operation. The first one is we have to prepare for the long-term operational duration. The average lifespan of the peace operation has increased steadily over the past 30 years, and also today we see missions that have been deployed for decades with the little prospect of securing a clear, sustainable peace. This is in part because the kinds of civil war into which peace operations are deployed are driven by weak state governance capacity, endemic corruption, political exclusion, and also the decade of structural violence. Second one is to develop multi-scale approaches to the mission. The violence conflicts represent a network of interlinked actors, including highly localized participants in fighting national actors, writing political groups, and also regional or international players providing support to one or more parties. Peace operations tend to represent this level discreetly. Civil affairs is mandated to do local conflict resolution. The political leadership of the mission engage with the national actor to a peace process, and often a separate special envoys is tasked with the regional mandates. The third one is to re-examine the rules of robust use of the force. There are settings in which the deployment of peacekeepers plays an ambiguously positive role in the conflict management, where the possible responsible organization is providing a security guarantee for widely accepted peace agreement. For example, true have sometimes demonstrated a real capacity to hold parties to account, have reduced the effect of spoiler and reduced risk to civilians. However, in long-lasting civil wars, where the parties have not committed to a variable peace process, or indeed during the long periods where there was no peace agreement in place with the most parties, the contribution of the true with robust use of force mandate is far less certain, while the costs are extremely high in both financial and human terms. In some cases, there are many significant value in deploying robust troops to protect civilians and prevent atrocities. But this goal should be clearly articulated and not confused with the support to a peace process. And expectations should be kept realistic. If the future of the peace operation is to include deployment into ongoing civil wars, situation of the asymmetric violence and chaotic admixture of the proxy fighters, militia, and foreign forces, the utility of peacekeepers should be seriously reviewed rather than presumed as necessary. The fourth one is to build innovative partnership. The concept of partnership should not be restricted to the usual United Nations and also some few regional organizations. For example, what kind of partnership will allow a peace operation to effectively address the way in which climate change affecting the conflict risk? The answer to this could mean a peace operation works with an international institution to develop conflict-sensitive disaster response planning, or in case of conflict involving international illicit network, a peace operation might need to be linked to an anti-trafficking organization or anti-cyber employing cyber tracking experts. And the sixth one is that to embrace a complexity. One of the challenges now facing today in the peace operation is the complexity of the conflicts around the world. If anything, the trend described above the point to deepening complexity as a factor like climate change, demographic shifts, and also new technology intersect with more traditional conflict drivers in convoluted waves. There is a tendency within peacekeeping to reduce narrative to fairly simplified terms, impulse to communicate and interdeliver narrative to actor on the ground, and also to clarify roles and responsibility within the system. Unfortunately, this narrative tend to place the UN in a more central role than in reality, meaning that peacekeeping operations are settled with responsibility, thus far outstrip their ability to generate change. Future peace operation may need to include climate change scientists, economists, urban planners, and also social media experts if they are to understand and affect the trajectory of the violent conflicts. So I will stop my discussion here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naing, for your propositions. Right, frankly speaking, while organizing this workshop, we thought about proposing some recommendations, right, from participants, right, on reforming, right, the US peacekeeping, US peace building, etc. But then we decided that we won't impose our point of view because, like, everybody have its own opinion, etc., right? But we see that recommendations of our colleagues are more or less the same, right? Probably it would be a good idea to collect, right, these recommendations, right? Any comments, any questions to our colleague from Myanmar? Okay, thank you very much for your intervention. It was great, right? Today online and a couple of weeks ago in person, right? Okay, we go further on, right? And once again, we go to Africa. Because we should go, we should pass by Africa, then go here, there, and finally, like Anna Teresa is also waiting, right? We see Anna Teresa, right? She's from Mexico, right? We should go finally to Latin America. Okay, we go. Do we have Dr. Joshua Olusegun Bolarinwa? Joshua Olusegun Bolarinwa from Nigeria. Do we have Dr. Olusegun Bolarinwa? Olusegun Bolarinwa. Okay, will probably doctor will join us, but meanwhile we'll go to Dr. Mwachofi Singo, right, from Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, and good evening to everyone. Good morning, those who are in spaces that are still morning. I greet you from Kenya. I teach at the Department of Political Science at the University of Nairobi, and I also work for a civil society organization that promotes disarmament called the Security Research and Information Center based in Nairobi. I've been asked to speak on the general theme of non-Western approaches to peace building and peacemaking. And I choose a topic that speaks to African traditions and cultures for making peace. But I want to first and foremost open my presentation by arguing that or rather stating, because it's a matter of fact, Chair, that majority of the armed conflicts that you find in Africa are ignited and fueled by external interests. If you look at where we have serious armed conflict today, in the DR Congo, in Central African Republic, in South Sudan, in Mali, in Libya, in Somalia, you will find that those conflicts have little to do with the African people. You know, they are ignited from elsewhere, usually promoting or driven by Western interests. And so here we are talking about non-Western approaches to peace building, non-Western approaches to dealing with conflicts that have been, you know, or are, you know, actively being promoted and fueled by Western interests. So it is almost futile to say that you can find a solution, especially in an international order, that if I look at Africa, it continues to relegate Africa to the back seat. You know, anything African is third rate. The African people, African cultures, African traditions. No one speaks about the African resources because it is what they want, okay? And therefore, it becomes very difficult then to be able to say that those African solutions that we want, those African approaches to peace building can have much results, because, you know, someone somewhere doesn't want that to happen. So that is my introduction. That is the background on which my presentation is anchored. I'll come to it a bit later. But let me project, if you will allow me to project.
Yes, yes.
Shared screen. Share. All right. You can see my slides, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, very good. Okay, then I want to speak about the traditional approaches of peace building in the context of Africa, and to argue that these are anchored on what an earlier speaker spoke about on constructivism theory, which argues that reality is socially constructed. You know, belief systems, people's cultures and language and identity plays a very important role in terms of what they perceive and, you know, internalize as reality. And so then within the context of Africa, the social setting, you know, the cultures of the African people, you know, culture played and continues to play an important role in terms of peace building. Culture is important because it outlines values and attitudes, you know, that individuals choose to embrace. And this then is seen as important because it articulates the common good of people who see themselves as belonging to a common origin and having a similar identity. So cohesion becomes important because it is seen as having a common good, a common end benefiting everyone. And so the articulation of cultural values become important in terms of building peace because people see themselves as having an interest in the outcome of that peace, of that unity and that, you know, common belonging. That is where the Ubuntu philosophy comes from, which is advanced by especially people from Southern Africa, Eastern Africa and Central Africa. I think the former church minister, Desmond Tutu from South Africa, is known as the person who popularized that Ubuntu philosophy, which is an ideology that a person is a person through other people. You are because we are. My prosperity is your prosperity. You cannot prosper when I am not prospering. So if the community is prospering, each member of that community is prospering. And if one member of the community is in problems, then the whole community is affected, right? And so that is a philosophy that promotes peace, especially through recognizing that all individuals belong to the collective whole. It advocates that individuals living in a group need not feel threatened by the progress of others, since the whole community is interlinked. And it has emphasis on brotherhood